Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I'd like you to consider an axiom I gave you at the beginning of this trial. Two wrongs don't make a right. Now, you can focus on the bad acts and indiscretions of my client, that he had been out drinking that night, that he initiated contact with the police, that maybe he was a little verbally abusive. But I want you to do something for me. Let's take Mr. Ramirez out of this equation for a minute here. Let's focus on the acts of the police. Because whatever my client may have done that may seem a little unsavory does not in any way, shape, or form justify the behavior of the police that night. That the main players, the police, carry a badge, literally and figuratively, of honor to protect and defend us from our worse and darker desires and ambitions, to restrain evil in this world. Now, let's consider the events of that night. Mr. Ramirez had been out enjoying some time with his friend, as he had a right to do, and was coming home. And inexplicably, this car was going 5 to 10 miles an hour in the dead of the night. Now, we get aggravated just in rush hour traffic when the speed limit drops from 55 to 45. How much more when a car going 5 to 10 miles an hour in the dead of night is doing that? And all you want to do is go home and get to bed and be with your wife. So he pulls over and wants to give him a few, vent a little bit, give him a little bit of his mind. But at that critical moment, the situation changes, and the police suddenly jump in the driver's seat. Mr. Levy seems to have no sense of humor whatsoever. He starts yelling at my client. And then he grabs my client and throws him up against the police car. And if that's not enough, an act of juvenile misbehavior, punches my client in the stomach, the ultimate low blow, sends him down to the ground, jumps on my client, and starts kneeing him in the back. And then, Mr. Waldman, not to be outdone, finds it necessary to pull out his .38 caliber service revolver, and from 3 feet away, to shoot my client, an unarmed citizen, in the back, in the shoulder. Let's consider the ramifications of this event, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The bullet entered his shoulder. It went and hit his scapula, a hard bone in the back, which you can even feel if you desire to. Went down, hit the larynx, the tiny bone, also known as xiphoid processor at the very bottom, and deflected off and went almost into his heart. Also passing through his right lung. Now, a lung is a lot like a balloon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. When it's full and deflated, it goes in and out as we breathe. But if it's ever punctured or deflated, it swells up like a balloon. And Mr. Ramirez was basically operating on half a lung through the time that he was shot until he got to the emergency room. Blood began seeping into his chest cavity. It says at the emergency room that 2,000 cc's of blood was removed, which doesn't really mean a whole lot to you probably. But think of this. 2,000 cc's of blood is equal to 2 liters. Within half an hour, 2 liters of the plaintiff's own blood was pumped out of his body. That is, the human body only has 5 liters of blood in it. 2/5 of his blood was drained from his body and had to be put back in again through the generous donation of donors. Let's consider for a minute Mr. Waldman's background, because this is important to the case. Under cross-examination, Mr. Waldman admitted that he graduated in the lower part of his high school, and then in the lower part of his police academy, and also had a reputation for bullying. Not only that, he bounced around to 5 different police stations in 3 states, Missouri, Michigan, and Illinois, before he finally wound up at the Chicago Police Department. He has exhibited almost borderline incompetency in performing his job, and also a reputation for bullying and overreacting, which became only so apparent in this present case. Also, under cross-examination, and as proof through his deposition, Mr. Waldman could not remember critical facts of the case. He couldn't remember what color clothes my client was wearing, what he was wearing at all, what he said to his partner and other important parts of this case. But he seems to have remarkable clarity and remember the exact moments of this case of the stabbing and shooting. Now, if he can't remember what in the world my plaintiff was wearing, or what he talked about to his partner, or anything else under those circumstances, how can you expect him to be credible about the critical facts about the stabbing, the alleged stabbing, and aggressive behavior of my client? Supposedly, the defense will contend, my client had this pocket knife, that he had it out, and that he stabbed Mr. Levy with it, which required Mr. Waldman to hit my client in the back. However, there's an important document that the defense probably wishes didn't exist. A document that I alluded to and showed Mr. Waldman, who freely identified and admitted it. It was written, it's an official act, official document by the Chicago Police Department, by impartial third person. The last three sentences are very revealing. While doing so, putting Mr. Ramirez and Levy into the car to take to the hospital, I observed the knife had a locking blade at approximately 6 inches in length, which was similar to the one recovered from the burglary scene. I sent the knife to forensics for testing. The report indicating that there was no discernible blood, fingerprints, or blood. Now, there's three things to think about here. The blade was closed. He says that earlier on the thing. There is no blood and no fingerprints on this knife. Now, if my client used this knife, you would expect to find it open with some blood on it, residual blood from the stabbing, from the horrible stabbing apparently, and my client's fingerprints all over it. None of that was found at the scene of the crime. I want you to consider briefly here in closing the compensation we're asking. We're seeking $600,000, which may seem like a large sum of money, but think about this. My client was in the hospital in intensive care for 2 weeks, in the hospital for 2 months, unable to work for 6 months. Dr. Ingris was able to explain to you that my client will never fully be able to work the way he did before, that he's a carpenter, a drywall, that he has to lift 40-pound panels of drywall, that he cannot perform his acts and his duties as employment the way he was before. Think for a second here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. How much money do you make in a week? Now multiply that by a month. Now multiply that by 6 months. What kind of number do you get? Consider that on top of the cost of being hospitalized for 2 months. Not to mention that the $6,000 only compensates a small amount of what Mr. Ramirez will now be able to get in diminished capacity and earning potential. He's only 24 years old, ladies and gentlemen, and he will live with this for the rest of your life. I want to thank you for serving on this jury, and to know that we are not here in a spirit of revenge or retaliation, but simply to seek justice, to ask Mr. Ramirez to be partially made whole. So I ask you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to find for my client, Mr. Ramirez, and to compensate him for a portion of what he suffered at the hands of Mr. Waldman.